For 30 years, I was the man they called when someone collapsed on their kitchen floor. I restarted hearts in the back of a moving ambulance. I carried men twice my size down staircases that were already on fire. And more times than I'd ever want to count, I held a stranger's hand in the back of that rig and felt it go cold before we reached the hospital doors. 30 years. Fire and rescue first, then paramedic. I have seen, up close, just about every way a human body can quit on a person. I can spot a heart attack 10 minutes before the man having it knows anything is wrong. I know the exact sound a family makes when you walk out of the bedroom and your face is already telling them the answer before your mouth does. So when my own son sat me down at my kitchen table, slid a glossy brochure across the wood, and told me an assisted living facility was the safest place for a man my age, I need you to understand something. I knew something he didn't. I had walked into those buildings on enough calls over enough years to know exactly what safe looks like from the inside. And I knew, with the certainty of a man who spent 3 decades around it, that the thing my boy was calling safe was not going to save me. It was going to quietly, comfortably, and with very nice landscaping, finish me. Now let me be fair, because fair matters here. I am not talking about the folks who genuinely need that kind of care. If your mind is truly going, if your body has stopped cooperating in the ways that count, then a good facility is a blessing, and the people who work in them are saints. I mean that. I'm talking about men like me. Healthy, sharp, still strong, and getting filed away years too early for the crime of getting old. My name is Ray. I'm 71 years old, and until I was 68, I spent my working life at Station 19 in Sacramento. 12 years on the truck, 18 more as a paramedic. 30 years of 2 in the morning phone calls that were never good news. Here's the thing that job teaches you, that they don't put in the pamphlets. After enough years, you stop being surprised by how people die, and you start noticing why some of them were already halfway gone before you ever got the call. I ran on plenty of men in their 80s who were tougher than recruits half their age. Men who still fixed their own fences and yelled at their own dogs and had somewhere to be on Tuesday. And I ran on men barely past 60 who had simply stopped. No disease you could write on a chart. They'd been retired, relocated, tidied up, and set down somewhere comfortable where nothing was ever asked of them again. And their bodies took the hint. I watched it enough times to believe it. The thing that finishes a man isn't living alone. It's being no longer needed by anybody and knowing it. I filed that away for 30 years. Turns out I was filing it away for myself. I lost my wife Ellen 3 years ago. 41 years married. She was the one who kept the calendar, kept the friends, kept the house full of reasons to come home. And when she was gone, the house got quiet in a way that a house has no business being. I'd retired the year before, so the station was gone too. No more crew, no more shift, no more men who'd trust you with their life on a bad night. 2 things that gave a man his shape, gone inside 18 months. I rattled around that place in Sacramento like a bolt in an empty toolbox. I had my workshop and my coffee and my son calling on Sundays. And I'll be honest with you, for about a year, I was one of those men I used to run on, just waiting. I could feel it. Danny is my son. He's 34, works in logistics, and he is organized the way his mother was organized. Spreadsheets, backup plans, a phone calendar that pings him about things 3 days out. He gets it honest. He's a good boy, and I want that on the record before I tell you the rest, because I don't want you thinking badly of him. Everything he did out of love and out of fear. The two get tangled up in people, and they were badly tangled up in my son. He drove up from the Bay Area on a Sunday. I should have known something was coming, because he brought a folder. The brochure was already on the kitchen table when I came in from the workshop. Glossy. A blue cover with silver-haired people laughing in a swimming pool. Beside it, a printed spreadsheet. Monthly costs, floor plans, a place 15 minutes from his house so he could visit. He'd done his homework. He slid it across the table and said, "Dad, just look at it. For me." So I looked at it. Assisted living, a studio unit, 3 meals in a dining hall, and something on the activity calendar called Chair Fitness at 10. $5,600 a month to sit in a room and wait. I looked back at him and I said calmly, "No." He said, "Dad, you're alone out here." After the stroke scare last winter, I told him the doctor cleared me, that it was nothing, that I was fine. And Danny looked at me with his mother's eyes and said the thing that told me this wasn't really about the brochure at all. He said, "Dad, you're not as young as you think you are." There it was. Not the spreadsheet, not the swimming pool, just that. You're not as young as you think. As if the number on my license was a diagnosis. As if 71 was a condition to be managed instead of an age a man is still allowed to run his own life at. I didn't argue. I made us both coffee, but that night, after his taillights disappeared down the road, I sat at that table a long time, and then I remembered a Christmas card. An old Fire Academy buddy of mine, Marty, had retired 2 years back and moved clear across the world. The card had a photo on it. Marty on a balcony, tanned, a beer in his hand, blue water behind him. On the back he'd scrawled one line, "Ray, you would not believe this place. Cebu, Philippines. Come see it before you're too stubborn to." I'd laughed and stuck it on the fridge. Now I got up out of that chair and went and took it down and read it again. Now, if you're going to say no to the plan somebody who loves you has made for you, you had better show up with a better one. I spent 30 years teaching young medics that panic is just preparation you didn't do in advance. So I didn't panic. I prepared. I gave myself 6 weeks, and I researched Cebu the way I'd have worked up a bad call. Assume nothing, verify everything. I read about the hospitals first, because that's the part everybody waves off until it's 3 in the morning, and it's the only part that matters. And what I found genuinely surprised me. Cebu City has real hospitals, Chonghua, Cebu doctors, with cardiac units and stroke care, and specialists trained in the States and Singapore. This wasn't some remote village with a first aid tent. This was a city. I called Marty and kept him on the phone for 2 hours, and I didn't ask him about beaches. I asked him the questions a paramedic asks. What's the ambulance response actually like? How far to a cath lab? What happens if a foreigner codes? He answered every one, and where he didn't know, he found out and called me back. Then I did the thing 30 years of the job burned into me. I wrote a plan, an actual written plan, the way I'd written 1,000 run sheets, current medications, my cardiac history, nearest hospital, and the 2 backups, a medevac insurance policy, paid up, blood type, allergies, the works. 1 page, laminated, 1 copy in my wallet, and 1 on the wall. The exact kind of plan my son would have been reassured by if he'd ever been willing to look at it instead of that brochure. Then I booked the flight. And then I called my kids. Rachel, my daughter. She's out in Denver, and we've always run a little cooler, her and me. She just went quiet and said, "Well, it's your life, Dad." Which from Rachel is practically a blessing. Danny was another matter. Danny went through the whole ladder in about 90 seconds. First the concern, "Dad, this is a huge decision." Then the practical objections, the distance, the health care, the visas. Then, quieter, the one he'd clearly been chewing on. "Dad, is this about Mom? Are you sure this isn't grief talking?" And when none of that moved me, he went silent for a long moment and finally said, "You're actually serious, aren't you?" I told him I'd never been more serious about anything, and that I was going for 3 months to start, and we'd talk every single week without fail. He made me promise. I promised. I have kept it. I want to be honest about the beginning, because the right decision and the easy decision are not the same thing, and you deserve the truth rather than a postcard. The heat hit me at the airport like a wall. I'd read about it. Reading about heat and standing in it are 2 different lifetimes. The first month, the simplest things fought back. I couldn't figure out how to pay an electric bill. I paid the foreigner price for everything at the market because I didn't know any better. I learned that when a man says he'll come Thursday to fix the water heater, Thursday is more of a general region on the calendar than a specific day, and the heat made me tired in a way that sat me down in the afternoons. I'll tell you the low point. About 3 weeks in, I was lying on top of the sheets at 2 in the morning, sweating, listening to a rooster who did not care what time it was, and I thought, Ray, you are 71 years old and you have moved to the other side of the planet where you know exactly one person. What in God's name have you done? 30 years of the job taught me the difference between a thought you have to act on and a thought you just have to notice and let pass. I noticed it. I let it pass. I got up and drank a glass of water and went back to bed. But I won't pretend it wasn't there. What turned it wasn't a thing I did. It was the people. I'd rented the top half of a small house on a quiet street in Talisay, just south of the city. Downstairs lived my landlords, Nilo and Delia. Nilo drove a jeepney. Delia ran a little sari-sari store out of their front window. Across the way was a young woman named Grace, a nurse who worked shifts at one of the city hospitals and whose cooking I first got to know entirely through my nose coming up the stairwell. I did not ask a single one of them for anything. It just started arriving. First week, Delia sent up a plate of food because I cooked too much, which she then proceeded to do too much of, suspiciously, several times a week. Nilo took me to his market and stood beside me while I bought fish, and just like that, I stopped paying the tourist price. Grace knocked one evening to say that if I ever felt off, dizzy, chest funny, anything, I was to bang on her floor with a broom handle, day or night, and she'd be up. She's a nurse, she said. It's what she does. Back in Sacramento, my neighbors knew my name. 2 of them had my phone number. That was the whole of it. I'd lived on that street 11 years. Let me give you the numbers, because I know some of you have been doing the math since I said Philippines, and I promised you honesty instead of a postcard. The top half of my house in Talisay, 2 bedrooms, a real kitchen, a balcony where I take my coffee, runs about $330 a month. Power, water, and internet together, around $90. A woman comes 3 times a week to clean and cook, $60 a month, and she's appointed herself judge of whether I'm eating enough. Food's about $110, eating out included, because a full plate down the road runs $2 and beats my own cooking. Here's the part that still gets me. My medications, blood pressure, a statin, a blood thinner for my heart, cost $35 a month at the pharmacy 3 blocks over. In Sacramento, those same 3 ran me $130 on Medicare. Same drugs, same doses. I checked more than once, because I didn't believe it either. My cardiologist, board certified, trained in Manila and Singapore, sees me for $20 and gives me 40 minutes. All of it together, rent, power, food, the housekeeper, medications, the doctor, lands between $600 and $700 a month. My fire pension and Social Security come to about $3,100. For the first time since Ellen died, I'm not watching a bank balance, I'm just living, and the rest piles up. Now hold that against the brochure. $5,600 a month, my son's spreadsheet said, for a studio and chair fitness at 10, and that's the cheap end. A private nursing home room back home now averages over $9,000. I'll be fair, because fair matters. Those aren't the same product. A facility buys medical supervision, an apartment doesn't, and I won't pretend otherwise. But for a man who doesn't yet need it, and most who land in those places don't, the day they arrive, the comparison is worth sitting with. Because one of those numbers buys you a place to exist. The other one bought me a life. And if you're running these numbers for your own life right now, and I suspect some of you are, do an old paramedic one favor and hit subscribe. I tell one of these stories a week, real numbers, no fantasy. Then stay with me, because I have to tell you what happened a few months in. The morning my own heart put everything I just bragged about to the test, and who came up those stairs when it did. Something happened about 2 months in that I didn't plan, and it changed everything. Nilo mentioned one evening that the jeepney and tricycle drivers at his terminal had no idea what to do if a passenger collapsed. And it happened, he said, more than you'd think. Heat, bad hearts, old men riding home from the market. So I asked if he could round up a few of them some morning. I'd show them a couple of things. 8 men showed up that first morning. I taught them hands-only CPR on a cushion in the shade of the terminal. How to tell a faint from a heart that's actually stopping. How to keep someone breathing until a real ambulance gets there. My Cebuano was garbage, and half of it went through Nilo. But hands are hands, and a chest compression is the same in every language on earth. 8 became 20. Word got around. A little school asked me to come show the teachers. 30 years I'd done this work, with a radio on my shoulder and a county paycheck. And here I was, doing it again, in a jeepney terminal, for nothing but the thing itself. And it lit me up in a way I hadn't felt since I turned in my badge. Then there's Joven, 19, one of Nilo's nephews, hangs around the terminal. First morning, while the older men were joking around, this kid was dead serious. Asked me to show him the compressions again. Then again, wanted to know the rate, the depth, why. Turns out Joven wants to be a paramedic. Wants it badly. But the training costs money his family doesn't have, and around here, a dream like that mostly just sits there. So I started teaching him for real. Evenings on my balcony, the actual curriculum, the way I'd have trained a probie at Station 19. He soaks up everything. Calls me Sir Ray, which I've given up correcting, and a few weeks ago he told me, plain as anything, that he's going to get there. And when he does, he's going to be the man who comes when somebody's family calls at 2 in the morning. I crossed an ocean because my son was afraid I had nothing left to offer anybody. And I ended up training the kid who's going to save this town's grandfathers 30 years from now. It came on a Tuesday morning, about 4 months in. I was at the market with Nilo when I felt it. Not a Hollywood heart attack, no clutching the chest, no dropping to the floor. Just a flutter, my heart tripping over itself, skipping and catching, then a tightness up under my breastbone and a lightheadedness that told me, in the clinical part of my brain that never retired, this one's real, Ray. Sit down. 30 years I'd read this exact thing on other men's faces. Now I was reading it on my own from the inside, and I'll tell you, it's a different thing entirely when it's your own heart doing the talking. I didn't have to explain much. Nilo saw my face change, and that was enough. He had me sitting on a crate in the shade before I finished the sentence, and he was already on his phone. Here's the part I want you to hear. He didn't call for an ambulance and then stand around waiting to see if one came. He called Grace, who was just off her shift, and Grace was in a taxi and at that market in under 10 minutes with her nurse's bag, taking my pulse with 2 fingers and asking me the right questions in the right order. Atrial fibrillation, she thought, heart racing out of rhythm. Not the worst thing, not something to sit on either. And then the 2 of them did the thing that still gets me when I think about it. They didn't wait. Nilo flagged a car. Grace got in the back with me, hand on my wrist the whole way, and we drove straight to Chonghua. 30 minutes, not to a village clinic with an aspirin and a prayer, to a full cardiac center with a cath lab and a Dr. Alonzo who had me on a monitor and medicated and back in normal rhythm before the afternoon was out. It was AFib, like Grace called it, manageable. I'm on a medication for it now, and I've had no trouble since. But I want you to sit with what actually happened that morning, because it's the whole argument in one scene. The man who spent 30 years being the one who comes when somebody's heart quits. When my heart finally faltered, I was not alone on a floor. A jeepney driver and an off-duty nurse had me in a world-class cardiac hospital inside half an hour, and neither one of them was paid to care whether I lived. They came because they knew me, because in this place people notice, and when they notice, they move. I called Danny that night and told him all of it. Not just that it happened, but what happened next. The market, Nilo, Grace, the taxi, the 30 minutes. Dr. Alonzo. He was very quiet for a long moment. Then my son said, in a voice I hadn't heard from him before, "They just took you? Nobody was even on shift?" I told him no. Nobody was on shift. They just came. And I told him the thing I'd been trying to make him understand since the day he slid that brochure across my kitchen table. Back in Sacramento, on that same Tuesday morning, I could have been on my own kitchen floor until the mail carrier noticed the mail piling up. That's the safe version. The managed version was a call button in a facility. This, neighbors who come running because your life is stitched into theirs. You cannot buy this. It doesn't have a monthly rate. And it did more for me at that market than any staff ratio in any brochure ever could. There was a long silence on the line. Then Danny said quietly, "I don't think we have that here, Dad." I told him I didn't think most of us did anymore, and that I'd gone and found a place that still did. I'd be doing you a disservice if I made this sound like paradise, so let me be straight with you about the hard parts. The way I'd have been straight with a rookie about a job that was going to cost him some sleep. Start with medical care, since that's the one that scared my son, and probably scares you. Here's my honest read, and I say this as a man who spent 30 years inside emergency medicine. Routine and moderate care here is excellent, and it's delivered with a warmth American medicine mostly gave up when it started billing by the minute. My cardiologist has time to sit, to ask, to actually listen. That's not a small thing. That's most of medicine. But I won't blow smoke at you. For the big stuff, a major stroke, complex surgery, the kind of call I used to run, you need a plan. Mine is written down. Chonghua for the emergency. The bigger centers in Manila for anything beyond it. And Medevac insurance paid up in case I ever need to go home. I'm not pretending the risk is zero. I'm managing it like an adult, the same way I taught other men to. Most things that go wrong with an aging body go wrong slow, and slow is manageable here. It's the fast things you plan for. Know the difference. Then there's loneliness, and I want to be careful here, because it's real, and it isn't what people think. I miss my kids. I miss my grandbabies. I miss Ellen every single day, and no ocean and no sunshine touches that. That one travels with me. So yes, there's a loneliness here, and I won't pretend otherwise, but I knew a different loneliness back in Sacramento, and I need you to understand the difference, because it's the whole thing. Back there, in that quiet house, it was the loneliness of a man nobody would have noticed was gone for a while. Here, it's the loneliness of a man who loves people who are far away. Those sound the same. They are not remotely the same. The first one is the kind that ends with a brochure on your kitchen table. The second one is just the price of having a full life on one side of the world and people you love on the other. I'll pay that price every day of the week. And then the plain aggravations, because they're real too. The heat runs your schedule, not the other way around. You learn to do your moving early and surrender the afternoons, or you learn it the hard way, over and over. The internet quits during typhoon season with a timing that feels almost personal. And the visa paperwork, the extensions, the Bureau of Immigration is a genuine headache. My advice, and I mean this, hire a local visa agent and pay them. It's worth every peso to hand that particular misery to somebody who does it for a living. None of that is a reason not to come. It's just the honest texture of the place. You take the amber evenings and the neighbors who come running and the $2 plates of good food, and you take the brownouts and the paperwork and the heat right along with them. That's not a catch. That's just a real life, and a real life always asks something of you. I spent 30 years watching what happens to people when nothing is asked of them anymore. I'll take the version that asks. Danny came in October, 6 months after I left, and I think he got on the plane still half expecting to find his stubborn old father living in some cautionary tale. Proof, finally, that he'd been right and I'd been wrong. That is not what he found. He got in late, jet-lagged and quiet, and I watched him take the measure of the place over those first days the way I once took the measure of a scene. He met Nilo and Delia. He ate Delia's cooking 3 nights running, and I saw him understand, without my saying a word, that this wasn't a landlord downstairs. It was family who happened to hold the lease. He met Grace, The nurse who'd sat in the back of that taxi with her hand on my wrist, and I watched something move across my son's face when he shook her hand and realized what she'd done for me. Off the clock, for nothing. And he met Joven. The kid came by the balcony the second evening for his lesson, dead serious as always, and before he left, he said the thing to Danny directly, that Sir Ray was the reason he was going to become a paramedic, that my father, he said, was teaching him the thing that was going to let him save people. My son looked at this 19-year-old boy who worshipped his old man, and then he looked at me, and I watched the last of the argument go out of him right there on the balcony. On his final night, we sat out there together in the warm dark, the tricycles thinning out below, a neighbor's radio playing somewhere, the geckos starting up on the ceiling. Danny was quiet a long time, then he said it. Dad, when we found that place for you, I kept telling everybody it was about keeping you safe. And on the flight over, I finally admitted to myself that wasn't really it. I wanted you somewhere I could picture you. Somewhere I always knew exactly where you were, so I could stop being scared. He looked out at the dark. That was about me. It was never really about you. And I don't think I ever stopped to ask whether safe was the same thing as good. Then I told my son the truest thing I know, the thing 30 years on the job taught me, that safe and good are not the same, and I have watched too many people wither in safe places where nothing was ever asked of them again, that a man doesn't rust out from doing too much, he rusts out from being set on a shelf. And that this place, the heat and the paperwork and the neighbors and the boy on my balcony, this place asks something of me every single morning and gives back more than it takes every single night. He nodded. He looked at the water a long while. Then he said, I'm bringing the kids at Christmas. I want them to see this. I want them to see you here. So let me tell you where I landed, plainly, the way I started. I'm 71 years old. I'm a widower and a retired paramedic, and my own son once compiled my life into a spreadsheet and drove 3 hours to move me into a facility with chair fitness at 10 in the morning. I said no, and instead I found this. I found neighbors who came running when my heart faltered and never sent a bill. I found a doctor who had the time to actually look at me. I found a jeepney driver who calls me family, and a nurse who told me to bang on her floor with a broom handle. I found a 19-year-old boy who's going to spend the next 40 years being the man who comes at 2 in the morning when somebody's grandfather goes down, and who's going to do it because a washed-up old firefighter from Sacramento crossed an ocean and taught him how. I found, at 71, the one thing I was most afraid I'd already lost. I found out I wasn't finished. Not even close. The chair fitness class at 10 o'clock is, I understand, still available back in Scottsdale. I haven't needed it. I do my moving in the cool of the morning, and I sit on my balcony in the evenings with people who know my name and are genuinely glad I'm still around. My son wanted to put me somewhere safe. I moved somewhere that still needs me, and every single morning since, I have been glad I did.